Bedtime has always been my favorite part of the day with Sophie. There's something about the dim light, the softness of her blanket, and her sleepy smile that makes the world feel safe. That night, as I tucked her in, she clutched her stuffed bunny tight and whispered with a grin that nearly melted me, "Mommy, Daddy took me to the house of the lady with the cat. Her cat is so fluffy." At first I laughed, thinking it was one of her playful dreams. But then my heart stumbled. I leaned closer, brushing her hair off her forehead, and asked softly, "The lady with the cat?" "What lady, sweetheart?" My voice was calm, but inside, I felt something coil tight. Sophie yawned, her little voice so innocent it hurt. "Daddy said she's his friend. We played with her cat and she made Daddy dinner." My chest tightened as the words sank in. Dinner? With a woman I had never even heard about? My pulse started to race, though I forced a smile for her. In that moment, I felt ice spreading through my veins. Mark had never once mentioned a friend with a cat, let alone bringing Sophie along. A house, a dinner, a woman. It was all wrong. Sophie's lashes fluttered closed, drifting into sleep, blissfully unaware of the weight of her confession. I sat on the edge of her bed, trying to breathe evenly, while my thoughts spiraled. Something was off, terribly off, and I knew this was just the beginning of finding out what. I stayed there longer than I should have, watching Sophie's chest rise and fall in steady rhythm. Her tiny body was so peaceful, her dreams untroubled, while mine were already cracking open. I wanted to shake off what she'd said, chalk it up to a child's imagination, but it gnawed at me. Kids don't invent details like dinner and cats out of thin air. Those words felt too specific, too real. My stomach twisted with a dread I couldn't name. Walking out of her room, I closed the door quietly and leaned against the wall. The hallway light flickered, casting uneven shadows on the floor. I pressed a hand against my chest, trying to steady the thudding that wouldn't quit. My mind kept replaying her words, each time sharper than before. A house, a woman, dinner, Mark. The pieces clashed together, painting a picture I didn't want to see. Yet I couldn't unhear Sophie's little confession. I thought about Mark, his recent late nights, the vague explanations, the way his phone seemed glued to his hand. All the small red flags I had brushed aside suddenly flared like alarms. And the worst part wasn't the possibility of another woman. It was that he had involved Sophie, my daughter, our daughter. A rush of anger bubbled beneath the surface, but I swallowed it down. I needed to be smart, careful. Whatever this was, it wasn't going to stay hidden for long. That night, I lay in bed wide awake, staring at the ceiling while Mark slept soundly beside me. His breathing was steady, almost too steady, as if he carried no weight on his chest. I wanted to nudge him awake, to demand answers right there and then, but I bit my tongue. Sophie's innocent words echoed louder in the silence than anything I could say. If he had secrets, I wasn't going to let him bury them with excuses. My mind spiraled between fear and fury. Fear of what it would mean if Sophie's story was true, and fury that he'd been careless enough, or bold enough, to let our daughter witness it. Every time I pictured her little voice saying, "She made Daddy dinner," I felt a sting like betrayal cutting twice as deep. Mark wasn't just hiding something from me, he was dragging Sophie into his shadowy truth, and that was unforgivable. By morning, I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to let this slip by with a shrug or an empty reassurance. I'd play it calm, controlled, even casual, but I'd find a way to make him talk. Sophie had unknowingly cracked the door open, and I was going to push it wider. Because deep down, I knew there was more waiting behind it, and I was ready to see just how far his lies went. The next morning, I brewed coffee like any other day, though my hands trembled just slightly as I poured his cup. Mark walked into the kitchen, still half-dressed for work, looking at his phone instead of me. I forced a smile, keeping my tone light, as though last night's revelation hadn't cracked me open inside. Sophie mentioned you took her to a friend's house. The one with the cat? My words hung in the air, casual on the surface but heavy with intent. He froze for the briefest second, so brief most people would have missed it. But I caught it. His eyes flicked up, sharp, before he masked it with a grin that didn't quite reach his face. "Oh, it was just a coworker," he said quickly, waving it off. She needed help moving furniture. Sophie got bored, so the cat kept her busy. The lie rolled off his tongue so smoothly, I almost admired how rehearsed it sounded. Almost. I leaned against the counter, stirring my own coffee slowly, though inside I was raging. "Strange," I said, tilting my head as if the thought had only just crossed my mind. "Sophie said the lady cooked you dinner." His smile faltered, his grip on the mug tightening ever so slightly. "You're overthinking, Emily," he snapped, the edge in his voice cutting through the room. "Don't start drama where there isn't any." I sipped my coffee, nodding, pretending to let it go. But in that moment, I knew I had caught him. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make him uncomfortable. He busied himself with his tie, avoiding my eyes, and I acted as though I was more interested in the steam curling out of my mug. Inside, though, I was cataloging every twitch, every flicker of defensiveness. He had snapped too fast, too hard, for something that was supposedly innocent. My gut tightened. I'd lived with this man long enough to recognize when he was cornered. "Of course," I murmured, forcing a soft laugh. "You're right. I probably am overthinking." The way his shoulders dropped ever so slightly told me he believed he'd dodged the bullet. But that only confirmed what I already knew. There was something worth dodging. I watched him grab his jacket, his movements brisk, almost jittery. He kissed Sophie on the head before heading out, never once meeting my eyes again. That, more than his words, told me everything. As soon as the door shut, I sank into the chair, my hands gripping the edge of the table. A cold fury burned in my chest. He thought I'd back down. He thought I'd swallow his half-truths like I always had, too tired to question him. But Sophie's little voice replayed in my head like a broken record, and now the seed of doubt had taken root. And if there's one thing I know about seeds, it doesn't take much for them to grow wild. The rest of the day, I wore my calm like a mask. On the outside, I went through the motions, answering emails, folding laundry, picking Sophie up from school. But inside, my mind was a storm. Every smile Mark had given me lately, every late meeting, every vague excuse, now looked different under this new light. Doubt wasn't just whispering anymore, it was shouting. And once that voice grows louder, you can't shut it out. When Mark came home that evening, he acted as if nothing had happened. He tossed his keys on the counter, scrolled through his phone, and made small talk about his day. I nodded in all the right places, even laughed once or twice, but my eyes followed every move he made. I was studying him, the way you study a puzzle missing a piece. And the truth was, I wasn't going to rest until I found that missing piece myself. Lying in bed that night, I turned my back to him, staring into the dark. I could feel the heat of his body inches away, steady, oblivious. That's when I promised myself something. I would stop taking his words at face value. I would stop letting him decide what was real. If he thought he could weave lies around me, he was about to learn just how sharp my instincts could be. And I already knew where I'd start. The following week, I made a decision I never thought I'd make. I called an old friend of mine, someone I trusted, someone discreet, and asked for a favor. My voice trembled as I explained, but beneath the nerves was a fire. I needed answers, not excuses. Mark had crossed a line the moment he brought Sophie into his secret world. I wasn't going to sit in the dark while he played house somewhere else. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, phone pressed to my ear, tracing circles on the wood as I spoke. My friend listened carefully. No judgment, just quiet understanding. "Leave it to me," she said firmly. "I'll follow him this weekend. If there's something to find, we'll find it." Hanging up, I felt both relief and dread. Relief because I wasn't alone anymore. Dread because I already knew what she'd uncover. Deep down, I wasn't chasing the truth. I was bracing for it. That Saturday, I could barely focus on anything. My body was at home with Sophie, but my mind was out there, trailing behind Mark. Every ping of my phone made my heart jump. Hours passed, the sun dipped low, and finally the message came through. Photos. My hands shook as I opened them, my stomach dropping at what I saw. Mark, walking into an apartment. A woman's apartment. The lady with the cat. The pictures didn't lie. There he was, carrying a bag in one hand, his shoulders relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in months. A man at home, not visiting a coworker. And when he left later that evening, his shirt was untucked, his face flushed. My friend's message was short but cutting. He wasn't alone. Same woman. Same apartment. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred, the bile rising in my throat. But the photos that truly broke me weren't of him alone. They were of him with Sophie. My little girl clutching her stuffed bunny while sitting on the woman's couch, the fluffy cat curled up in her lap. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. That was it, the unforgivable. It wasn't just betrayal between husband and wife anymore. He had taken our daughter into his lie, made her a participant in his secret life. Rage roared through me, hot and blinding, but beneath it was a cold clarity. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about her. I could swallow my pride, endure the humiliation, even look the other way. God knows I'd tried before. But not this. Not with Sophie in the middle of it. He had crossed a line so deep it carved through everything we had left. And I knew exactly what I needed to do next. I sat there in the quiet of my kitchen, the phone heavy in my hand, the photos burned into my mind. My heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears, but strangely, I felt a calm settle over me. The kind of calm that comes when grief hardens into resolve. I whispered to myself, "How dare you, Mark? How dare you drag Sophie into your lies?" Saying it out loud made it feel real, and with that reality came power. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt in control. I wasn't the woman left in the dark anymore. I had proof. Proof of his betrayal, proof of his recklessness, proof that he'd shattered not just my trust, but the safety of our little girl's world. And once you hold proof in your hands, you stop begging for answers. You start planning what to do with them. That thought alone steadied me like nothing else could. As I closed the phone and tucked it away, I already knew what my next move would be. Mark thought he was clever, thought his secrets were locked away. But secrets always have a way of spilling out, and this time, I was going to be the one holding the lid. He had played his game long enough. Now it was my turn to set the rules, and he wasn't going to see it coming. When the idea came to me, it felt almost too simple. If Mark was going to keep parading his lies, then I'd let the truth slip out in a way he couldn't control. I invited his parents over for dinner, a warm family evening, nothing out of the ordinary. Mark was pleased, even smug, thinking I was playing the dutiful wife again. But beneath my polite smile, every detail was part of a plan. The stage was set, and all I had to do was let Sophie's honesty do the rest. The night arrived, and I worked the kitchen like any hostess would. The smell of roast chicken filled the air, wine glasses clinked, and polite chatter floated across the table. I watched Mark laugh at his father's stories, his mask firmly in place. He had no idea that the cracks were about to split wide open. Sophie sat between her grandparents, happily nibbling on carrots, her little legs swinging under the chair. She was the picture of innocence, and my quiet weapon. I kept my tone light, my smile practiced, as I leaned toward her. "Honey," I said sweetly, "why don't you tell Grandma about the nice kitty you played with?" The words slid off my tongue like honey, but inside I was steel. Sophie's eyes lit up, and she clapped her hands, eager to share. I held my breath, watching Mark stiffen in his seat, the fork pausing halfway to his mouth. The trap was springing, and he didn't even know it yet. Sophie's face lit up the way only a child's can when she's talking about something she loves. "Oh, yes," she chirped, her little voice carrying across the table. "Daddy always takes me to the ladies' house. She has the softest kitty, and she gives Daddy kisses too." Her words rang out, clear and unfiltered, slicing through the cozy atmosphere like shattered glass. For a moment, no one moved. The silence was deafening. I watched his parents freeze, forks hovering mid-air, their eyes darting between Sophie and their son. Mark's mother's lips parted, stunned, while his father's brow furrowed with something sharper, disappointment, maybe even disgust. The entire table had shifted in an instant. Sophie kept chattering, blissfully unaware of the weight her words carried, as if she were describing nothing more scandalous than a bedtime story. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Mark's face flush deep red, his jaw tightening as he leaned closer to me. His voice dropped to a furious whisper, sharp enough to cut. "What are you doing?" he hissed, his eyes burning with panic. I turned my head ever so slightly, my expression calm, almost serene. "I'm just letting the truth come out, Mark," I murmured, my tone smooth as glass. For once, the lies weren't mine to carry. The rest of dinner was a performance in contrasts. Sophie happily chatted about the cat's toys, her tiny hands gesturing as if she were painting a storybook in the air. His parents listened politely, though their eyes never left Mark. The silence between their questions and his strained answers stretched long, uncomfortable, and heavy. Every bite of food felt loud, every clink of silverware a reminder of the truth now sitting at the table with us. Mark shifted in his chair, his charm gone, his laughter dead. He tried to steer the conversation toward work, toward sports, anything but the woman with the cat. But it was too late. His mother barely touched her plate, her lips pressed tight. His father's disappointment radiated like a spotlight, exposing every lie Mark had wrapped himself in. And I sat there, calm, refilling glasses and passing bread as though nothing unusual had happened. Inside, I felt a quiet power rise in me. For so long, I had been the one doubting myself, second-guessing my instincts. But not anymore. Sophie's innocent words had done what I no longer needed to force. They stripped him bare in front of the people he respected most. And as I cleared the plates, I knew this was only the beginning. The real confrontation, the one that would change everything, was waiting just around the corner. When the last dish was rinsed and his parents had gone, the house felt heavier than ever. Mark hovered in the doorway, his jaw clenched, his eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and fear. I wiped my hands on a towel, moving slowly, deliberately, as if I had all the time in the world. Finally, I reached for the envelope I'd kept hidden in the drawer. Thick, sealed, and damning. I held it out to him like an unspoken sentence. His face paled the moment he saw it. He didn't even have to open it to know. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice shaking despite his attempt to sound firm. I didn't flinch. "These are from the private investigator," I said coldly. "Proof of every visit, every lie, every time you dragged Sophie into that woman's apartment and thought I'd never know." My words were sharp, each one landing like a strike he couldn't dodge. He ripped the envelope open, flipping through the photos, his hands trembling. I watched the color drain from his face as he came across the image of Sophie curled up with that damned cat. His breath hitched, his chest heaving, and for a moment, he looked less like the man I married, and more like a stranger caught in his own trap. "Emily," he stammered. panic bleeding through his voice. Please, don't ruin me. We can work this out. I folded my arms across my chest, letting him squirm under the weight of his own evidence. Work this out? I repeated, my voice low but steady. You think this is about us? About you and me? I stepped closer, locking eyes with him until he looked away. This is about Sophie, Mark. You dragged our daughter into your affair. You let her sit in that woman's house, play with her cat, watch you be kissed by someone who wasn't her mother. Do you even understand how twisted that is? He dropped the photos onto the table, burying his face in his hands. Emily, please, I made a mistake, he muttered, his voice cracking. His shoulders slumped, and for a second I saw fear flicker through him. Real fear, not just of being caught, but of what came next. I didn't soften. Not this time. I had given him enough grace, enough second chances carved out of my own doubt. That part of me was gone now. You didn't just make a mistake, I said, my tone cutting through the air like glass. You made a choice, again and again. And every time you involved Sophie, you showed me exactly who you are. His eyes darted up at me, wide, desperate, but I didn't waver. I had already decided. I'll be filing for full custody, I continued firmly. A father who drags his child into his lies doesn't deserve to raise her. His mouth fell open, but no words came out. The silence was louder than any plea. He reached for me then, desperate, his hands shaking as if he could somehow hold everything together by force. Emily, think about Sophie, he pleaded. Don't take her away from me. I'll change, I swear. I'll end it. Just give me one more chance. His words tumbled out in a rush, flimsy promises that sounded emptier with every syllable. I stood still, letting the silence stretch between us like a wall he couldn't climb. Think about Sophie? I repeated, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. That's exactly what I'm doing. You didn't. You thought about yourself, your pleasure, your escape, your secrets. But not once did you think about what she was seeing, about what she'd carry with her. My throat tightened, but I held steady. You've already lost her trust, Mark. You're just too blind to see it. He opened his mouth, but I raised my hand, stopping him. Save it, I said, my tone final. The courts will hear your side. They'll see the photos. They'll hear about the woman, the cat, the dinners, the kisses, and then they'll decide who Sophie belongs with. But between you and me, we both already know the answer. I picked up the envelope, slid it back into my purse, and walked away, leaving him crumbling in the silence he had created. Months later, life looks nothing like it did the night Sophie first mentioned the lady with the cat. The court hearings are behind us now, and the papers are signed. I have full custody, and Sophie's world is safe again, bright, steady, and free of shadows. Mark tried to fight, of course, but the photos, the testimonies, and the truth were too heavy for even his charm to cover. Watching him crumble in that courtroom felt like justice, but more than that, it felt like freedom. Our new place isn't fancy, but it's ours. The walls are painted in cheerful colors Sophie picked out herself, her artwork taped proudly to the fridge. At night, we curl up on the couch with popcorn, movies, and laughter that feels lighter than it has in years. Sometimes, I catch her watching me with a smile that makes my heart ache in the best way, like she knows, even at 6, that I fought for her, and that I won. Mark's parents don't visit him much anymore. The disappointment in their eyes that night at my table never left. They see him for what he chose to be, and in their own quiet way, they stand with me. I don't need their approval, but I won't lie. It feels good to know I'm not alone in this truth. For once, the lies belong only to him, and the life Sophie and I share is built on something real. There are moments when the past still knocks at my door, memories of his betrayal, the sting of those nights I doubted myself. the image of Sophie holding that cat while he played house behind my back. But those moments don't control me anymore. They remind me of what I overcame, of the line I drew and refused to cross again. Pain used to define me, but now it's just a marker of how far I've come. Sophie has adjusted better than I dared to hope. She talks less and less about her father's visits, and when she does, it's in passing, without the confusion that once clouded her little eyes. Instead, she talks about our garden, about school, about the sleepovers she wants to host in her new room. Her laughter fills the house like music, and I find myself holding on to those sounds like they're treasures. Because in truth, they are. And me? I'm stronger than I ever imagined. The woman who once second-guessed every gut feeling now stands tall, certain, unshaken. I look at myself in the mirror, and I don't see the betrayed wife anymore. I see a mother, a fighter, someone who turned betrayal into power. And as much as Mark tried to break me, in the end, he gave me the gift of rediscovering who I really am. One evening, as we settled into our little living room, Sophie climbed onto my lap with her blanket and whispered, "Mommy, I love our new place. It's so happy here." Her words pierced straight through me, softer than any verdict, stronger than any proof. I kissed the top of her head, my arms tightening around her, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly at peace. I smiled, my voice steady as I answered, "Me too, sweetheart, me too." And I meant it with every fiber of my being. The walls around us no longer carried the weight of lies. They carried our laughter, our quiet mornings, our late-night talks about silly dreams and future adventures. Every corner of this new life held freedom, and in that freedom, I found justice. Not just for me, but for her. Revenge hadn't been about destroying Mark. It had been about reclaiming myself, protecting my daughter, and showing him, and everyone else, that betrayal didn't break me. It built me. And as Sophie drifted to sleep in my arms, I knew one thing with unshakable certainty. This was our beginning, not our ending.